Before getting into the main of this video, there are two facts about school shootings that you should know. The first is that they're going down. Northwestern University did an analysis on this and found that school shootings have been trending downward since the 1990s and even slightly since 2006. And second, school shootings are a very minuscule issue. In 2001, there were about 37,100 high schools in the United States. Now, between 1999 and 2017, the number of high schools almost certainly increased to an average of those years higher than what they were in 2001. But it doesn't matter. We'll just use the lower number from 2001. Say there were 37,100 high schools over those 18 years since Columbine. In those 18 years, there were 214 school shootings with 280 people killed. This amounts to 11.89 shootings per year and 15.56 people killed in school shootings per year. This means there's about a 0.032% chance any high school will have a shooting that year, or a 1 in 3,125 chance. But kids go to high school for 4 years, so multiply this by 4 and they have a 0.128% chance of being in a high school with a school shooting, or a 1 in 781.25 chance. But that's the odds of being in a high school with a school shooting. The odds of actually being killed by a school shooter is going to be incalculably lower than that. And all this is assuming that there are as many high schools in 2017 as there were in 2001, when there are almost certainly more high schools in 2017 than in 2001, which means all of these numbers here are going to overestimate the odds of being in a school with a shooting. In contrast, the odds of the average house catching fire every year is 1 in 315, or 1 in 79 for your house catching fire every 4 years. Keep all this in mind and understand that this is the context in which these clowns that Trump was meeting with are saying to do something about gun violence.
So I think we have a unique opportunity to get comprehensive background checks, make sure that nobody buys a gun in this country that's a criminal, that's seriously mentally ill, that's on the terrorist watch list.
I'm a big fan of the NRA, but I had lunch with them, with Wayne and Chris and David on Sunday, and said, it's time. We got to stop this nonsense. It's time.
This is a scary level of either incompetence or dishonesty on the part of these politicians, using a one-off event and vague impressions, either in his mind or just in the public's mind, to push for civilian disarmament. Frankly, what is really newsworthy is that there aren't more school shootings given what high school is. Just think about high school. You take 14 to 18-year-olds, put them all in a stupid little building or campus, 7 to 10 hours a day, and have them ordered around by the worst people. Okay, the shit-libs, school marms, and Nosebergs, and all the soyim running around. Literally the worst people. Government employees who either can't do anything else, but want to lord over people whose brains aren't fully developed, and lord over people who have very limited rights. The nature of the job is that it's going to attract kind of bad people. And you're learning things that you're not going to use in the real world. Unless you're going to be some sort of bona fide scientist, high school is going to be mostly useless. That initial reaction, that instinct you have, that this stuff you're learning in high school isn't going to matter in the rest of your life, it's mostly correct. It's mostly true. And you're not being socialized in these places. How the hell are you supposed to learn the norms of real people if all day you're hanging around with kids and government workers? You don't learn anything useful. You're not socialized. You're doing a bunch of work and not being paid for it. And you're being bullied around by 110 IQ midwits who either can't or don't want a real job. But let's get back on track. The fact that school shootings are a vanishingly rare phenomena and are going down, this is the context in which to understand this manic drive to push for civilian disarmament after a single event. And Trump appears to be going along with it. Maybe this is 8-dimensional underwater backgammon or whatever, but Trump had a very disappointing conference talking about universal background checks and preventing the quote-unquote mentally ill from owning guns.
We have to do what's right. When it comes to mental health and other issues, I said we have to do what's right.
Now, the problem with this is so balls in your face obvious that it feels cringy to even have to point it out. But okay, here's what happens. A group of racially motivated psychiatrists calls you mentally ill because you're white and you don't have totalistic adoration for brown people, and now you can't get a gun. For example, if you are white and you don't want to live in a place full of mestizo or full of black, and you have a negative view of a group that votes for third world candidates and is singularly responsible for keeping the Democrat Party alive, or a group that is responsible for over half of the murders in the United States, a group that is taking in government services about $400 billion more than they pay in taxes, or a group that destroyed iconic cities like Detroit, St. Louis, Baltimore, and many others. If your view of these people is anything but totalistic adoration and coddling, well then you are a racist. And how long until that is classed as a mental illness? That if you don't have the correct view of blacks, that if you don't view these people positively, that's the way you're supposed to view all this stuff. You're supposed to view them positively. Well, then you must be mentally ill. This is not the case yet, but look, there's a vocal movement within psychiatry to have quote unquote racism classed as a mental illness. And as psychiatry gets less white and gets full of brown people, you're going to get more people saying this. More people saying that if you think the people who destroyed Detroit are on the whole negative and have a negative effect on wherever it is they go, that if you see this, then you're mentally ill. Basically, you're going to have a bunch of blacks saying if you have a negative view of blacks, well, you must be mentally ill. In 2015, Dinesh D'Souza, who's not even a serious intellect, he's just a basic Dems are the real racist, boomer conservative type, and he's brown skinned, so he really serves a purpose for whites to say, I'm not racist because I like this brown person. Even he was ordered by a judge to undergo psychiatric counseling. Newsweek reports the judge saying, quote, I'm not singling out Mr. D'Souza to pick on him, Judge Berman said. A requirement for psychological counseling often comes up in my hearings in cases where I find it hard to understand why someone did what they did. Berman continued, that Mr. D'Souza committed this crime involves a colossal failure of insight and introspection. The case notes also say that Mr. D'Souza has weaknesses in controlling his own impulses and that he is prone to anger in reaction to criticism. This weasel word bullshit. Prone to anger in reaction to what criticism? Should he be angry? Was the criticism bullshit and dishonest? Whatever. This judge is using psychiatry against a political opponent, and obviously because of it's because of D'Souza's political views. Another example would be Adrian Schoolcraft, who was ordered to falsify crime statistics for the New York Police Department, and he then became a whistleblower. In 2009, he released evidence of statistical falsification to internal NYPD investigators in an attempt to have the issue resolved internally. He was then illegally abducted and committed to a psychiatric hospital for 6 days. He then, of course, released the records to the Village Voice, and he got all sorts of awards, and it became a big blow up, and the rest is sort of history. You can look into that. But the point is, the NYPD was using psychiatry to get this guy classed as mentally ill and throw him into the loony bin because he was saying some stuff that they didn't want to be said. Another classic example of political psychiatric abuse was of Martha Beale Mitchell, who was diagnosed as having paranoid delusions when she said that she believed Richard Nixon was engaging in all sorts of illegal activities. Now, think about Trump's behavior and him being treated as having some sort of mental illness. As president and as a billionaire, he has people and resources who can shield him from psychiatric abuse. But if Trump were just some average Joe without money and without any kind of political power connections, and some people wanted to say he was mentally ill, I think they would be able to get away with it. Trump, of all people, should be aware of the danger of having things contingent upon someone else classifying you as mentally ill. There's also some stuff on Wikipedia on the psychiatric abuse in the Soviet Union, saying, quote, in 2005, referring to the archives of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union Central Committee and the records of the 3 special psychiatrical hospitals, Sychyovskaya, Leningrad, and Chernyakovsk hospitals, to which human rights activists gained access in 1991, Prokopenko concluded that psychiatry had been used as a punitive measure against 20,000 people for purely political reasons. This was only a small part of the total picture, Prokopenko said. The data on the total number of people who had been held in all 16 prison hospitals and the 1,500 open psychiatric hospitals remains unknown because parts of the archives of the prison psychiatric hospitals and hospitals in general are classified and inaccessible. And there is absolutely no reason it couldn't happen here. As we're learning in South Africa, a constitution won't protect protect you if the people don't care about law or fairness. They'll use whatever they have against their political opponents. If you want to say that this is just for public consumption, that behind the scenes these people know all the facts and they're just dumbing it down for the dum-dums, well, you don't know that. Show me some leaks from this behind doors meetings where they have any kind of proper analysis of any issues that they make laws about. I think this is it. I think this meeting is it. I've been to all sorts of corporate meetings. They're full of all these kinds of garbage statistics and just buzz phrases that people say. And the asinine laws that these jokers pass certainly don't reflect any kind of deep thought on the part of anyone but the lobbyists. No, I think this is it. I think this meeting is a reflection of the level of thinking that goes on there, if it could even be called thinking, that goes on in these halls of power.
And Mr. President, I would just add, I hope we follow the data here, because the data is going to tell you, we've talked a lot about safe schools, a lot about mental illness. The data tells you that America has a gun violence rate that is 20 times that of every other industrialized country in the world, but we don't have a higher mental illness rate. Our schools aren't less safe. We don't spend less money on law enforcement. What's different is that we have the loosest, most lax gun laws in the nation.
That's what distinguishes the United States. That's all. You can't think of anything else that distinguishes the United States from the white countries of Western Europe. Well, I've worked this out, and the homicide rate by race in the US is 11.48 for blacks and 1.69 for whites and Hispanics from the FBI. The FBI doesn't collect sub-data for Hispanics versus non-Hispanic whites, but I have a very quick and dirty estimate based on the Hispanic ratio of whites in the prison population. And that is that Hispanics are 2.72 times more likely than non-Hispanic whites to go to prison, based on their population and based on their percentage of the prison population. So, from this, we can estimate that Hispanics are 2.7 times more likely to commit any kind of crime, including homicide, than non-Hispanic whites are. And so if we apply this number, 2.72, based on the prison population for all crimes, we get an estimate of the non-Hispanic white homicide rate of 1.18 and an estimate for the Hispanic homicide rate of 3.22. This would put the white Americans in between France and Ireland on the OECD countries and homicide rate per 100,000. And US whites are probably more violent than whites in Western Europe, and I can point to several genetic explanations. One is that the wars in Europe since the 1800s killed off more of the violent whites in Europe, perhaps. Another would be that the whites who left for the Americas were on average more genetically predisposed to being adventurous, and being violent is perhaps goes along with being adventurous. But I don't know if any of that's true. I'm just saying there's certainly plausible explanations that for it being genetic. There's no reason to just assume it's not genetic. So white Americans being at 1.18, this is totally normal. This is totally within the number for their fellow Europeans. The reason for the whole of the United States being so high, well, it's because of the blacks and to a lesser extent the Hispanics. Now this dangerous idiot in this meeting here said gun violence, and that's cute, but it's retarded. There's no reason to be more opposed to gun violence than any other kind. In fact, gun violence may be less bad because being killed with a gun is probably faster and less gruesome than being killed with a knife. Moreover, there's a ton of natural experiments where we look at changes in gun law and changes in the homicide rate. And we can look at the effects of changes in gun laws in Chicago, in Washington, D.C., in Florida, in Michigan, and in Texas. And we also have data on England and Wales. We also have data in Australia. And this is kind of how you need to look at this. Changes in gun laws and changes in homicides. Feinstein, in her little speech to Trump, said that incidents are going up after the assault weapons ban lapsed. But what is she talking about? Homicides in the US have been going down since the 90s. The only thing I can think about would be incidents of the use of assault weapons, which would just be more of this thing they do where they say gun violence. Sure, availability of guns means that if you want to kill someone, you'll use a gun. But Diane, I gotta tell you, if someone really wanted to kill you, they could do it with their bare hands. What the data really shows is that if someone wants to kill someone else, he's going to be able to, and the gun laws just don't matter. And for those concerned about fatal gun accidents, well, traffic and poisoning accidents are far more common. I think this is because guns are so obviously dangerous that people are kind of cautious with guns. It's intuitive that you have to be very careful with a gun. Whereas things that aren't designed to kill you, like cars and medication, you're less careful with that. I also think this is why there's probably very few accidental deaths with chainsaws and explosives. But anyway, this focus on gun violence in particular is just transparent nonsense. I mean, when they ban guns in the UK and find out that homicides don't go down, what are they going to do next? Ban knives? Oh wait, they actually did. The UK is a living joke. That used to be a joke. People used to just say, oh, what are you going to do when you ban guns and violence doesn't go down, when all the murderers just use knives? What are you going to do then? Ban knives? Well, yes. Yes, they are, and that's what they're trying to do. Another shocking thing that Trump and his fucking brain trust kept bringing up was the gun lobby, the gun lobby. Oh, you're afraid of the gun lobby, the NRA.
Chris, did you have something?
No. I think you underestimate the power of the gun lobby.
You don't address?
We didn't address it, Mr. President. Look, I think
You know why? Because you're afraid of the NRA, right?
The reason that nothing has gotten done here is because the gun lobby has had a veto power over any legislation that comes before Congress. I wish that wasn't the case, but that is.
Look, the gun lobby almost doesn't exist. It's a boogeyman that these people are making up to make it seem like there's some nefarious force keeping them from having common sense gun reform. No, it's not the gun lobby. That's nothing, right? What's keeping these dangerous idiots from pushing for more civilian disarmament are voters, not the gun lobby. It's voters that are keeping them in check. Whatever power the NRA has comes from people voting your dangerous and foolish asses out of office. I don't know what exactly Trump is doing. Maybe he's playing quantum hungry hippos or whatever. I don't know. But this conference just illustrates that these people in the highest positions of government are as dumb as they appear. People think, oh, in private and closed door meetings, all of this sort of data I talk about, this is where it gets presented. This is where the real thought happens. They go into all the statistics, they know the truth, and what they're doing here is just sort of presented for the mass asses. I don't think so. I've seen corporate meetings, they talk like this. The only difference between the United States and Norway is its gun laws. Right, it's all this pseudo-scripted sound bites, or this corny asshole talking about what the data says. This shit stain should be banned from using data. Right? Just banned. Oh, he's using data. Don't listen. He always lies, or either he's lying or he's just stupid beyond stupid can possibly be. A fucking Google search on changes in homicide and changes in gun laws yields more insight than whatever so-called analysis this guy does, or whoever it is feeding him his facts. Now, I'm glad that Trump, throughout this meeting, pointed out that gun-free zones are where almost all mass shootings happen, right? Obviously, like where else would they happen? But this event as a whole is just a disgrace.